Well, here they are. The Pittsburgh Steelers are 6-2 at the bye week. Who would have thunk? Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Southside Beat here on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcasting Network and DK Pittsburgh Sports Steelers YouTube channel. Chris Halicke here. To my right, Greg Macafee, coming to you from Dallas, Texas.
World traveler.
I remember the days in which I did this show when I was the one in Dallas all the time.
Yep.
And now we have a member of the Southside Beat, but in Dallas, but it's not me. He's obviously in Dallas to cover Pitt SMU tomorrow. And then to my left, Matt Williamson. Just so glad to have you on too, to also talk about football here. What's going on, Matt?
Not a lot. I'm on the South Hills beat. I'm just kind of chilling in the South.
Nice. All right. So yeah, like I said, 6-2 at the bye week. Good stuff for the Steelers. Obviously, before the season, I had them at 5-3 at the bye week. I also predicted them to finish 9-8. And so that kind of lets you also know, and we'll get into it later, how they would have fared in the second half of the season. But let's recap the last game first before we move on to the second half of the season, because while it was an 8-point victory, I thought it was still a good win for this team. Could it have looked a little bit better? Yes, it probably should have, but a win is a win, especially when you don't play your best football, which I don't think the Steelers did, and they still put up well over 400 yards of offense. So I'll kick it around. Greg, what did you think of the game, the 26-18 win over the Giants? What stood out to you, good or bad?
We've kind of talked about it each week, but their ability to start really, really slow at the beginning of games and just kind of gradually ramp their play up as the game goes on. I mean, it's just another case of that this week on the defensive side of the ball. I thought they started off really bad, but they were able to make some turnovers there in the second half. Obviously ended it with TJ Watt's strip sack, Beanie Bishop's interception to end the game. I think it's something that needs to be addressed. Their slow starts as the season goes on, but it's something that just keeps rearing its head. I think they're one of the top second half defensive teams in the league, and it's kind of defined their first half of the season in a way. So it's pretty strange to watch that it keeps coming up week in and week out. Something to fix moving forward, I guess.
Matt, what did you like from the game, or not like from the game? You could look at a number of different things. I think the offense moved the ball really well, but they didn't punch it into the end zone nearly enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no question. A couple things I want to point out to start is special teams is pretty remarkable. That they're creating not just a big play, but a monster play on special teams with consistency. Now, it's not going to happen 4, 5, 6 weeks in a row. But I mean, if it happens twice more in the season, it's still a monstrous special teams advantage. And far and away, any way you look at it, they are the best special teams unit in football right now. And that can't be understated, and it's easy to overlook. I really liked how Wilson threw the football, just physically with power. A lot of his throws in the first game died or started to droop before they got there, didn't have a lot of juice on them. And I'm not even talking about early in the game when he was rusty and missing. I mean, a lot of his completions were, I wonder if he still has his fastball, even though I had seen it in training camp. But I thought he threw the football really well in this one. And then the big negative to me, and I'm actually getting more and more concerned about it, is their interior run defense is problematic. I mean, teams are mostly getting them in nickel, and then your front six of really good players, but not exactly run stuffers, Cam Hayward, Ogunjobi, Highsmith, Watt, Queen, Wilson, they're at disadvantages right now. They're getting moved, and they're not the stoutest bunch besides Hayward.
Yeah, it's a... That was going to be one thing that I was going to really kind of point out, was the run defense was definitely alarming.
Yeah.
Now overall, their run numbers are still good. Like if you look over the body of the 8 games, the numbers are still good. But I am concerned going forward of how they're going to correct that. Part of me is thinking there's all this talk about wide receiver 2, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 2. And while I think they need to add a wide receiver, and I would honestly probably argue that maybe nose tackle might be a bigger need. And it's not because I don't like Keanu Benton. I think Keanu Benton's a heck of a player, but I'm also beginning to kind of think that Keanu Benton is best served as a 3 tech. And so
I think so too. I think he's a 3-4 end. I don't think he's a nose. And Adams isn't coming back any minute now. It doesn't sound like it.
Right. And so that's why I'm like, okay, if they can possibly add, and maybe it's, Breeden Fehoko, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily just automatically throw him in there and be like, oh, there's our answer. If there's possibly somebody you can add that can, play over the center, or at least between the center and the guard as a 1 tech more consistently, then okay, then maybe they can, if they can bring that guy in and not pay too much to get him, then maybe that's the upgrade that they need. I don't know, but I'm definitely concerned about the run defense going forward. The good thing is that they have the bye week now, so they have some time to try to correct some things, look at some film, what they're doing right, what they're not doing right, maybe some different ways to get the linebackers more involved, because Landon Roberts is a very good run defending linebacker. Patrick Queen, whenever he's able to kind of fly to the football instead of kind of be the second guy trying to chase the ball carrier, he's typically pretty good in run defense. So it was definitely concerning to me too. But overall, I thought it's still 26 points. It was a season high for the offense in yards. They moved the ball very, very well, as they should have. And those are the kind of things you want to see. People will be like, oh, well, it's the Giants. But those are the teams that you should move the ball against. You should be putting up a whole bunch of yards against teams like that. So, okay, well, I think we can go ahead and just, put this one behind, 26-18, 8-point victory, 6-2, good first half of the season. Really could have been 7-1 if they would have just kind of finished things out against Dallas. But either way, still a good first half of the season. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we will preview the second half of the season, and maybe at the very, very end, take a quick look at the trade deadline. But either way, let's take a look at the second half first, what these games look like now, what we thought they would look like before. And, because I don't think people think I think people thought it was a much more difficult schedule at the beginning of the season than it is now. So anyway, we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back right after this.
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
Alrighty, 9 games left. 6-2. If they go 4-5 the rest of the way, they'll be 10-7. And I think with the way the AFC looks this year, 10-7 pretty much guarantees a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the Steelers don't want to go 4-5 down the stretch. They want to try to finish as high on as much of a high as they possibly can. So, the first thing I want to do is kick it around. What is the biggest difference on the schedule from the way it looked at the beginning of the season, before the season began, to the way what's going on here? We had a little bit of an internet issue there. My bad. That's my internet. What does the schedule look like? Like, what did it look like at the beginning of the season? And what does it look like now? What's the biggest difference that you're seeing over these 9 games? Greg, you can go first.
I mean, at the beginning of the season, I would assume that a lot of people thought the AFC North would kind of be a slaughter run of games with the Browns, the Bengals, and the Ravens, and everyone, all 4 teams. I mean, including the Steelers, were kind of shaping up to have really good seasons this year. And I feel like the Browns and the Bengals have kind of dropped off a little bit. They haven't performed up to the expectations that everyone thought they were going to have. So that the back half of the schedule looked like a real gauntlet of a run to finish off the season. So I would think that would be the kind of the biggest change of what we saw at the beginning of the season. compared to where it is now, because I think at the beginning of the year I had the Steelers possibly splitting with the Browns, just given where their roster was and everything like that. And I would think that that's 2 wins now going into the second half of the season. So I just think the divisional schedule, the strength of schedule there is kind of decreased, I would say, compared to the beginning of the season.
Matt, is there anything else? Is it just the AFC North stuff that kind of sticks out to you, or is there anything else on the schedule that kind of surprises you?
Well, a couple things. I want to rewind a little bit to the last segment because this is disturbing. We talked about the troubles against the run. I'm a big EPA believer. Per EPA, the Steelers have faced the easiest slate of offenses in the league so far, and that's going to change very, very drastically. So if you're not dominating them, that's a little concerning. Now, another negative in terms of how the schedule has changed is this upcoming game looks much more difficult than it did when the schedule came out. I mean, Washington looked like a terrible football team to me that was totally rebuilding, trying to rebuild a culture, didn't have any talent. And I assume Washington will be favored in that game. I don't know. Who knows what they'll do this week. But, to reiterate what was already said, the Ohio teams definitely look lesser than they did with the day the schedule came out. I thought the Browns and Steelers were comparable at that point. I had picked the Bengals to win the division, and they're hanging on for dear life to even be in playoff worthy. But obviously, too, the Browns have a little bit of life. The quarterback change. It's a different. You're going to see a different team than the god awful, horrendous Browns that were there for the first 7 weeks or whatever it was.
Yeah, that's. I think Steelers fans, when they saw Deshaun Watson go down, that they were probably like, "Oh, we would have rather faced Deshaun Watson."
Yeah, I'd rather face Anthony Richardson.
Yeah,
yeah. So, yeah. The Washington, I didn't think Washington was going to be like terrible, but I didn't think Washington would be the most efficient EPA or offense in terms of EPA.
Yeah,
no way I thought that, and that's where Washington is right now.
Yeah, I thought their defense would be the bottom 5. The defense I thought would be horrendous, and I didn't see the offense coming like this.
To be fair, their run defense is not good.
No,
they're not. They're one of the worst efficient teams in terms of defending the run. So that they can be ran on, and that's a good thing for the Steelers. And Mike Tomlin teams are historically and even recent history good coming out of a bye. And so I think that can be a win, not taking anything away from Washington being a 6-2 team, but Mike Tomlin's got the juices flowing when it comes to getting his team ready to play coming out of a bye week. So the numbers are typically, I don't remember exactly what they are, but the numbers are very, very good with him coming out of a bye. So let's kind of break this down a little bit. Washington, I think, is okay. Let's break it down to just the North. We talked about how the AFC North is different. Let's AFC North. Let's try to count wins the rest of the way. Okay, so they're 6-2 now. What is the realistic record for the AFC North right now? Like with the way the teams look, with the way the Ravens look, and Lamar Jackson playing at an MVP level, and Derrick Henry being King Henry and leading the NFL in rushing, but their secondary is also absolutely atrocious. The Bengals defense is bad. What is a realistic record for the AFC North games? Because it's 6 games. And really quick, it's important to know when those games come because they play Baltimore at home and then 4 days later have to go to Cleveland. Now, Cleveland, and Cleveland's not, like, that's not an easy game, regardless of who the opponent is, because you're going to be beat up from playing Baltimore.
Yep.
And then it's Cincinnati on the road after that, and then it's Cleveland at home. So it's literally 4 division games in a row. The other ones are Baltimore on a short week after playing in Philly. Like
and then another short week
days later, but then they'll play after they play the Chiefs on Christmas. They'll have a week and a half to prepare for the final game of the season at home against the Bengals. Yeah. So, what is a realistic record for the AFC North? And then let's add those wins on to the 6-2 record they have now. Greg, you go first.
I would say at the low bar, I would say 3-3. Realistic, I would say 4-2. I think that's 2 wins over Cleveland and split with Cincinnati and Baltimore. Anything can happen in a divisional game. So I would think it's realistic to say that they might drop 1 to either the Bengals or the Browns. And a split with Baltimore would be, I think, a victory. So I would say 4-2.
Okay, Matt, do you think the same thing, or are you a little less optimistic?
No, this team plays well in the division. They're built for it. Tomlin knows these teams extremely well. I hate that they're going on the road on a super short week after the Ravens, but it is an opponent that you're familiar with at least. You won't need as much prep time to deal with the Browns. Cam Hayward knows Joel Bitonio or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's not a lot of prep needed for that, but I do dislike it quite a bit. I think the Steelers and Ravens will split. I don't know who will win where, but if you ask me, in 2030, I think the Steelers and Ravens will split. In 2038, I think the Steelers and Ravens will split. It's just kind of how they play. And I think 500 or better against Ohio is very possible.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I think fans kind of need to be wary of is just automatically assuming that because the Steelers have played well against Lamar Jackson in the past just automatically means that they should at least split, if not sweep the Ravens. Like it doesn't, it should not work like that. And it doesn't work like that because Lamar Jackson, let's be realistic. Okay. So the Steelers swept the series last year. In the first game, which was at home, it took Kenny Pickett hitting the bomb to George Pickens at the end. And that was also with Lamar Jackson having his receivers drop, 18 passes. And I think at least 1, if not 2 of those drops were in the end zone. And so we're talking about literally the Ravens leaving multiple touchdowns off the board because their receivers couldn't catch passes. It wasn't because of Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson actually played really well in that game. And then the second game, which was in that monsoon in the season finale, Lamar didn't even play because the Ravens had already had everything wrapped up. And so I just don't think that you can automatically assume the Steelers are going to beat Lamar Jackson just because they've had success against him in the past. I do think they split with Baltimore. They need to win this first home game for sure, which, if they were to do that, they'd be at worst 7-3 at that point, maybe even 8-2 if they could beat Washington as well. And that would obviously be a great place to be. The one thing that it's the 3-game run of at Philly, then 6 days later at Baltimore, and then 4 days later at home on Christmas against the Chiefs. Like that
pretty horrible
run is terrible.
That's
why that game, that is the gauntlet.
The Eagles
right
are playing really well now too.
Yeah. And see, that's the thing with the Eagles is that, and we can start to kind of transition because I'm going to say 4-2 in the division too. I'm going to say split with the Ravens, split with the Bengals, and sweep the Browns. I could even see a scenario in which they split with the Browns, but sweep the Bengals because both times they play the Bengals, they're playing the Bengals on a long week.
Yeah,
because they'll have played Cleveland on Thursday Night Football and have that extra that mini bye to prepare for Cincinnati on the road, and then later on, like we already talked about, they'll play the Chiefs on Christmas and then have another mini bye and then prepare for the Bengals. So could see that scenario playing out too. So I'm going to say 4-2 in the division. So let's go to the other 3 teams.
Like looking
go ahead.
Cincy. I think Cincy beats Vegas, but then they have to go at the Ravens and then the Harbaugh Bowl in LA. They may have cashed it in by then. The T. Higgins and Hendricksons of the world might be like, I don't know. The end of their season might not be their best football is my point. And then the other thing I want to throw out there too is I do the drive every day with Dale Lawley, and these exact words. I've covered the Steelers for 33 years. I've never seen them win in Philly, whether it's preseason. I mean, it's just a terrible place for the Steelers for whatever reason.
Okay, so let's get into those 3 games because I think between all of us, we pretty much have a consensus that 4-2 in the division is realistic.
Yeah,
and so that being the
case, would be great.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because that right there puts the Steelers at 10 wins. And there you're already talking playoff berth. So
And you
what's the
probably have
difference
the edge
between
for the Ravens in the division if you can split with them.
right? Because
Just
they definitely have a
tiebreakers and
better
things.
conference record. Yeah, the Steelers have a better
Right.
conference
I mean,
record right
losing to
now.
the Raiders
So,
really hurts the Ravens, and already losing to the
Mhm.
Browns in the division already hurts the Ravens.
right. All right. At Washington, which is up next. Then we already talked about it at Philly, which is week 15, I think. And then home against the Chiefs on Christmas, and that is 4 days after playing the Ravens in Baltimore. Those games, the most winnable to me is at Washington. I think that's pretty easy to say. The Chiefs are the Chiefs. And then you talk about, I actually looked it up. You actually talk about the Steelers not winning in Philly. The last time the Steelers won in Philly was 1965.
Right.
Now
There
that's
might be
not
something to that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not that's not counting preseason. I don't know the last time even preseason, but just regular season games. They have not won in Philadelphia since 1965. Even the 1979 Super Bowl winning team played in Philly that year and lost. So they just don't play well in Philly. There's just something about going to the wrong side of the Commonwealth that just makes this team not play well. Even in 2008, when that Super Bowl winning team went to Philadelphia, they played their worst game of the season. I mean, absolutely atrocious. I think Ben Roethlisberger was sacked like 9 times in that game or something like that. It was ridiculous. So do we think 1-2 in these other 3 games is feasible? I mean, is it? I mean, I could really see a situation where they don't win any of these 3. Matt, I'll kick it to you first.
Yeah. I want to focus on the Chiefs just for a minute, too,
Yeah.
because short week, but it's same for them. I mean, all those teams play Saturday and then they flop. I don't know if you knew that. You know, like the Texans and Ravens play Saturday, the Steelers and Chiefs, or the other way around, and then they play each other. So everyone's working on the same amount of rest on Christmas Day, those 4 teams playing each other.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're better than the Steelers, obviously. But there's a lot of room for weirdness in that game. I mean, how many game lead do you think the Chiefs are going to have in the West on Christmas Day? Maybe 4. You know what I mean? Like, that might not even be close. And I got to think that the road teams on Christmas might be thinking about home and family, and Taylor Swift's going to be in the building probably. Like, there's room for weirdness there. You know, that's all I'm saying. Like that. It's a standalone Tomlin game. Like, I'm not going to predict the Steelers beat the Chiefs. Don't get me wrong. But if Kelsey has a hangnail and they have a 4-game lead in the West, maybe they give them the day off on a short week. You know, things like that. The Steelers were probably going to need it more than the Chiefs.
Oh, for sure. And
yeah,
I mean, that Christmas Day game, I've already been calling it. It's the Taylor Swift versus Sierra Bowl. Like, that's just the way that I've just funnily been viewing that game.
Not my area of expertise, but I bet Taylor carries a bigger stick than Sierra.
I think
in terms
so.
of popularity, yeah.
Greg, what do you think about these 3 games? What stands out to you when it comes to like where are any W's in those 3 games? Because those other 3 games, like I said, Washington at the beginning of the year seemed like it was going to be one of the more kind of easy games to win, and all of a sudden it's not that.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the year, I had the Steelers beating the Commanders and then losing to both the Eagles and the Chiefs. I like the Steelers coming out of the bye, getting healthy, getting some reinforcements. I mean, Nick Herbig might be coming back. You're looking at guys like that, like Cordarrelle Patterson,
Possibly Zach Frazier too.
Possibly Zach Frazier
He'll be back,
as well.
Yeah.
So
Cam Sutton.
You know, some of the starters are coming back from injury and everything like that. Cam Sutton, like you said, Matt. So I really like them coming out of the bye week and just having that extra week to prepare for a team like the Commanders, especially with a rookie at quarterback in Jaden Daniels. I mean, he's been great this year. But if you put some pressure on, you never know what can happen. With the way the Eagles are playing this year, the way Saquon's running the ball, what Jalen Hurts has done, I don't like going to Philly and getting a win. I'm just not optimistic about it. And then the Chiefs on Christmas Day, you look at that as a loss, but as Matt said, I think anything can happen in a situation like that on Christmas Day. The Chiefs are traveling down the road. The Pittsburgh Steelers are at home in Acrisure Stadium in front of a big crowd. Anything could happen, but I would say 1-2 is pretty realistic to me.
All right, so let's
quick,
put it.
I
Yeah,
keep
go ahead.
interrupting. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
No,
You're
good.
and this is really a conversation from 1 week from now. But I probably will pick the Steelers to beat the Commanders. Maybe I'll change my tune when I really dig in. And I know that this has been a phenomenal season. It's been a great story for the Commanders. But when you break down their schedule, it's not quite as impressive as it sounds. So I'm going to buzz through it super quick for you.
Yeah.
I mean, they lost in Tampa opening day. Nobody batted an eye. They were supposed to lose. Everyone thought they were going to be bad. They beat the Giants by a field goal. Nobody really cares. But the Giants didn't have a kicker in that game. They would have won that game with a kicker. Then they go and they beat the Bengals. And everyone's like, ooh, maybe this Washington team's for real. But Cincy stinks. We didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
They blow out the Cardinals. Okay, good win. They blow out the Browns. They hang with the Ravens and lose, but I thought that was an impressive showing.
Mm-hmm.
You beat the Panthers by 1 million. And then you win on a Hail Mary against the Bears. I'm not super impressed with any of it, but as a body of work, it way outkicked their coverage,
Yeah. And I think that's why, and plus you take that into account, along with the fact that they haven't been very good against the run at all.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the fact that, again, Mike Tomlin teams are typically very good out of the bye week.
Yeah.
And so
12-4. I just looked it up.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. 12-4. In Mike Tomlin's
straight, by the way. 6 straight.
Yeah, I knew their recent history was very, very good. So 12-4 out of the bye week, 6 straight wins. You might say, well, they're due to lose. Well, I mean, if they're going to lose one, Washington, like I said, looks like a pretty good team at least.
Mm-hmm. They're at least good at it.
Yes,
coming out of the bye,
for sure. I'm going to go ahead and run it off like this because I think one thing that you want to try to do, not that you can, if the Steelers had their way, obviously they'd win the rest of their games, but you want to go into the playoffs with momentum. You don't want to be limping in. And so what if they had this situation where they win in Washington to improve to 7-2? They won at home against Baltimore to go to 8-2. Then they go on the road. Right. Yeah. But let's say then they go on the road in Cleveland and lose. Let's just say, they got beaten up by Baltimore. They went on a short week and they just lose. So they fall to 8-3. Then they beat the Bengals. They're 9-3. Then they beat the Browns. They get the revenge. They're 10-3. Okay, this is great. But then that run starts. Okay, now they lose in Philly. They're 10-4. Now they lose in Baltimore. They're 10-5. At that point, it's like, okay, they're probably still playing for the division at that point. Now we bring to that pivotal Christmas Day game against the Chiefs. If they can somehow win that game and then use that mini bye, prepare properly, go beat the Bengals, and finish the season 11-6, and go into the playoffs with some momentum, I think that might be the best case scenario, / somewhat realistic scenario. Am I way out of my league there?
No, because plus you've been used to playing playoff teams. These aren't wins over the Raiders and Giants and Junko teams. You've played a lot of high quality, similar opponents. And the last thing I just want to throw in about scheduling, and again, so much could change between now and the week 18, of course, but is Joe Burrow going to play in that game? Are the Bengals even going to be alive? You know what I mean? They may not have anything to play for at all, and he may have 3 or 4 injuries to be like, I'm done,
Yeah. Right. All right. So before we wrap this up, we're about 29 minutes on the show right now. So we're going to do this really, really quick. We are now just days away from the trade deadline. Don't know if anything is going to happen, but it sure looks like the wide receiver market has kind of dried up a bit. I mean, it doesn't. The Giants don't seem too motivated to move Darius Slayton. The Raiders may or may not entertain trading Jacoby Myers. I keep hearing Courtland Sutton's name, but the Broncos are 5-3 and they have a better point differential than the Chiefs. I just even if they lose Sunday, it's like I don't know if they are sitting there at 5-4 at the trade deadline and thinking, yeah, we got to get rid of our best wide receiver for our rookie who we think is franchise quarterback Bo Nix. Like, it doesn't seem realistic to me. Is there a receiver out there that you guys think that is somewhat realistic for this team that's worth adding, that's worth parting with draft picks to get?
Take it away.
I mean, there's nothing that like super like sticks out to me the most. I mean, obviously, like, you know, we just saw what Darius Slayton could do. His name was being tossed around, and he had a really good game, you know, against us. And I think the Giants may have came out, and I can't remember what the conversation was, or if he's even still on the trade block or anything like that. But he's one name that comes to my mind. I mean, Jacoby Myers, I think would be very interesting to throw into this offense if you're not giving up a bunch of, you know, draft capital for him. But there doesn't seem to be that top tier guy like DK Metcalf or, you know, Tyreek Hill or Brandon Ayuk that, you know, that we've talked about all season long. There's not like a severe game changer out there that could slot into the wide receiver room and immediately impact this offense. You know, I think there's a bunch of guys that, you know, could obviously contribute, but not be that, you know, 1A, 1B to George Pickens.
Yeah, the Christian Kirk injury screws this up a little bit. He would have been a good candidate. I think you could still get Mike Williams or Adam Thielen for a bag of footballs, but I don't know that they change anything. You know, I mean, I don't even know. They don't help on special teams. Thielen hasn't played. You don't even know if he's healthy.
Yeah.
I do think Slayton and Myers could get pried away. I mean, those teams aren't going anywhere. I still think that could happen. And this sounds crazy, but just never forget that this is an extremely week-to-week league. And we were talking about Cooper Kupp. They win on Thursday, and now the Rams are going to the Super Bowl.
Sean McVay's like, nah.
Right. But if they go to Seattle and get whipped, they might be like, all right, we'll take you wherever you want. You know, like things can just change super quick in, you know, one loss. Like, I know you're not going to get T. Higgins, but if I'm the Bengals and I lose the Raiders this week, I'm trading T. Higgins, you know?
Yeah. I just don't think the Bengals would trade him with
Right.
Like, let's help the Steelers out. I think of all the names that we've talked about, I think that are realistic. I think the one that excites me the most might be, I'd say it'd either be Jacoby Myers or Darius Slayton. I think either one of those guys would be an upgrade, not a massive upgrade, but at least something to make that receiver room a little deeper, a bit more formidable. Where Van Jefferson slides all of a sudden slides in as a number 3, feel a lot better about that. Calvin Austin slides in as a number 4, feel great about that. To me, Calvin Austin as a number 4 is a really, really good number 4.
Even if you call Jefferson a 4, he's a great 4. Austin a 3, whatever, you know. Your fourth receiver would be a strength.
So that's why. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I think if it's a late, like a late day 3 pick, if it's a 7th round pick, and you can, or it's a pick swap of some kind of that's just swapping 7th rounders or whatever it is, which that wouldn't make sense. But either way, if you could part with like a day 3 pick, you know, next year, or if it's a 6th round pick next year or something like that, then maybe it's worth it. I don't know. But
Chris, I know we're up against it, but it really seems like a buyer's market. I mean, like, for as little as Deontay went for, a lot of these, I mean, as little as Uche went for, like, all these recent trades are give you a 7th 3 years from now. You know what I mean? It's like nothing.
And the fact that, like, I remember reading a report out there about the Deontay trade was that there were 2 teams that were involved in it, and then the Ravens were the 3rd team that got involved, and they had the best offer. And, like, you look at what the trade was, I'm like, it was a pick swap.
Could you offer any less than that?
I'm like, what were the first 2 offers?
That could be the 32nd pick in their round for the first pick of the round later. There's like a couple comp picks in between. Like, you can't give much less. And Carolina picked up most of his salary.
It's crazy. So that's why I'm like, now the Steelers couldn't, for anybody who doesn't know the rules, the Steelers were not allowed to trade for Deontay Johnson. NFL teams are not allowed to trade away a player and then reacquire him the same way within 2 years. The only way they could bring Deontay Johnson back is if he were to become a free agent, which he does, and then they were to sign him to a contract. Or you
could launder him. You're like, hey, Buccaneers, trade for him for a day, and then we'll trade him here. I don't think the Ravens are doing that for you. I know again. I didn't know that rule, or 2 right feet doesn't equal a right and left until this week.
It says both feet. It says both feet in the rule book.
Yeah, I learned both those rules this week. Yeah.
Really quick, and I brought up a really stupid scenario in our Steelers feed on DK Pittsburgh Sports, where I'm like, okay, so you're telling me that if a receiver goes up to catch a pass, and he is like midair, catches the ball, is starting to come down, and the defender grabs one of his feet, and he then has the other foot down and like lands on it, and then hops like 3, 4, 5 times down the sideline, and then is knocked out of bounds by another defender, that's not a catch? Because by rule right now, that would not be a catch, because he didn't get both feet in bounds, even though he caught the ball, hopped like 3, 4, 5 times in bounds with the ball. That's not a catch. Like, that's where I'm like, okay, that's a really ridiculous scenario to paint. And I don't think that scenario will ever play out, but with this league, you never know. It could happen next week. Yeah. It could happen
I said
Sunday.
The same thing. I'm like, what if they throw a swing pass to Najee, and before he catches it, he blows out his knee or ankle and just hops all the way down the field and gets blasted out of bounds 80 yards later? No catch.
Seriously. I mean, that's like, it's not a catch right now, because you have to get both feet in bounds. Or at that scenario, it would be like all Najee would have to do is fall to the ground, because one knee or one shin or one elbow counts as 2 feet. But 2 feet doesn't count as 2 feet. It has to be both feet. The rule needs to be rewritten. Anyway,
I bet they go back to the drawing board on that one this year.
Agreed.
And I can't wait to cover the owners' meetings in March to see if any team actually does submit that rule. So, either way, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Really good first half of this team. They're 6-2. It's gonna be rough down the second half. I think the schedule looks a little lighter than it did at first. But it's still going to be really tough. Like I said, that one stretch of 3 games of at Philly, at Baltimore, home against Kansas City is going to be absolutely brutal. I think if they win one of those games, they'd be in good shape. But either way, really appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you for listening, especially here on this bye week. We'll be back next weekend to really kind of take a look at the Commanders, what that matchup looks like. And until then, we'll catch you guys on the flippity flip.